रामाय रामभद्राय रामचंद्राय वेदसे रघुनाथाय नाथाय सीताय पतये नमः. Uttarakhand, chapter number 14, Ravana and Kubera's forces. The recitation begins now. Accompanied by his 6 counselors, Mahodar, Prahasta, Maricha, Shuka, and Sarana, and the heroic Dhumraksha, eager for encounter, the graceful Ravana, elated with his strength, sallied out, as if consuming all creatures with his wrath. And leaving behind cities and streams and hills and woods and groves, he in a moment came to the mountain Kailasa. And hearing that wicked-minded lord of Rakshasas, breathing high spirits, had arrived at the mount in the company of his counselors, the Yakshas could not stay before that Rakshasa, and knowing this one is the king's brother, went to where the lord of riches was. Going to him, they in full related all about the doings of his brother. And on being permitted by the bestower of treasures, they went out for battle. And then, like unto the agitation of the ocean, there took place a mighty ferment of the forces of the knighted king, as if making the mountain tremble. And then there took place an encounter between the Yakshas and the Rakshasas, and therein the counselors of the Rakshasa were smitten fiercely. And finding his forces in that plight, Dashagriva set up full many a cheerful shout, and in wrath began to speak. Of the counselors of the Rakshasa chief, each coped with 1,000 Yakshas, and then struck with maces and clubs and swords and darts and tomaras, the Shagriva dived into that deep of a host, and rendered inert and sore assailed, the Shanana was deprived of his movements with volleys of weapons resembling torrents of rain. And albeit drenched with blood streaming down in hundreds of torrents, he, like a mountain flooded with a downpour, being wounded with weapons of the Yakshas, doth not betray any smart. And that high-souled one, raising up his mace, resembling the rod itself of time, entered into that army, dispatching Yakshas to the abode of Yama. And as a flaming fire burneth up an extensive sward of grass stocked with dry firewood, he began to consume the Yaksha army. And as the wind scattereth clouds, the small remnant of the Yaksha army was scattered by the redoubtable counselors of Ravana, Mahodar, Shuka, etc. And some were wounded, and some broken down, and some measured their lengths on the ground in the encounter. Other Yakshas, being deprived of the arms in the field, being fatigued, sank down, embracing each other, even as banks drop down on being worn away by water. And no room was left in the sky in consequence of its being thronged by hosts of sages and warriors wounded and rushing for conflict, and finally ascending heaven. And finding the foremost Yakshas, endowed with great strength, give way, the mighty armed Lord of Riches dispatched other Yakshas. In the meantime, O Rama, a Yaksha named Kantaka, accompanied by an extensive force and a large number of vehicles, on being dispatched, rushed on the foe. Wounded in the conflict by Kantaka with his discus, as if by Lord Vishnu himself, Maricha toppled down to the ground from the mountain, like unto a planet whose merit hath waned. And in a moment, regaining his consciousness and resting for a while, that night ranger fought with the Yaksha, and thereat, on being defeated, he fled. Then Ravana entered within the gateway of the palace, garnished with gold, and decked with lapis lazuli and silver. And thereat, O king, the warder named Surya Bhanu prevented the night ranger Dashagriva as he was entering, and albeit prevented, the night ranger entered in. And when, O Rama, that Rakshasa was prevented, he did not stay. And then, struck by that Yaksha with the gateway uprooted, he, discharging blood in streams, looked like a hill with minerals running on it, and hit with that gateway resembling a mountain summit in splendor, that hero did not sustain any injury on account of the boon he had received from the self-sprung Brahma. And on being struck by the same gateway, the Yaksha ceased to be seen, his body having then been consumed to ashes. And witnessing the prowess of the Rakshasas, all began to flee. And then they, afflicted with affright, fatigued, and with pale faces, entered into rivers and caves, leaving their arms behind. Mangalam Koshalendraya Mahaniya Gunapti Chakravarti Dhanurjaya Sarvabhaumaya Mangalam.